The Galactic Warning. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Coalition buzzed with tension. Hundreds of alien representatives filled the room, their diverse shapes and colors reflecting the galaxy's vast life forms. The towering figure of Supreme Chancellor Thrazek slammed his clawed hand on the table. "We cannot ignore the reports any longer," he bellowed, his deep voice silencing the murmurs. The room dimmed as a holographic projection flickered to life in the center. A massive, sleek, black warship appeared, floating menacingly in the void. The hologram zoomed in to show its weapon systems, enormous cannons, laser turrets, and strange glowing devices no one could identify. The Galactic Coalition had never seen anything like it. Ambassador Vril, a lanky insectoid with shimmering wings, stepped forward. This monstrosity belongs to humanity," she said, her voice trembling. "Last week, it destroyed an entire raider fleet in less than 5 minutes. No survivors, not even debris." The chamber erupted into chaos. Some representatives shouted for war. Others whispered about the end of the coalition. "Silence," Thrazek demanded. His sharp eyes scanned the room. "We are not here to panic. We are here to decide what to do about this human threat." A reptilian envoy hissed, his tail flicking nervously. "Humans have always been dangerous, but this is different. A single ship with the power to annihilate fleets. What if they turn it on us next?" The murmur of fear grew louder. Ambassador Kale, the Coalition's liaison to humanity, rose from her seat. She was one of the few who had spent time on Earth. Her humanoid features made her more relatable to humans, but in this room, it marked her as suspect. "Let me remind you," she began, "that humans joined the Coalition willingly. They'd fought alongside us in battles. They've contributed technology, medicine, and resources. Perhaps," Vril interrupted, "but their technology outpaces ours. They've shared scraps, Kale. What else are they hiding?" The hologram changed, showing a battle simulation based on intelligence reports. The human warship faced an incoming fleet of 50 raider ships. In mere moments, bright beams of energy tore through the attackers. The Coalition envoys watched in silence as the simulation ended with the warship unharmed. "It's not just their technology," Vril said. "Their tactics are ruthless, precise, efficient. This is not the work of allies. This is the work of a species preparing for domination." Kale clenched her fists. "You misunderstand humanity," she said firmly. "They don't seek domination. They've always acted in defense." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Thrazek leaned forward, his expression grim. "Defense or not, we must consider the possibility that humanity's power has grown too great. If they ever decide to turn against us, we will be helpless." A soft chime interrupted the discussion. All eyes turned to the main console as a message from the human warship arrived. It was simple and direct. "We are watching." Gasps filled the room. Even Kel couldn't hide her shock. "What does this mean?" Vril demanded. "A threat? A warning?" Kale shook her head. "I don't know, but we should speak with them directly before jumping to conclusions." "Speak with them," the reptilian envoy hissed. "And what if they decide we're no longer useful? What if they strike us down the moment we show weakness?" Thrazek raised a hand to quiet the growing argument. "Enough. Kale, you will lead a delegation to Earth. Find out why they built this warship and what their intentions are." Kale nodded, though her heart was heavy. She had seen humanity's resilience, their creativity, their will to survive. But she also knew they were capable of great destruction when threatened. As the meeting adjourned, whispers filled the chamber. Some envoys talked of alliances, others of war. And a few, in hushed voices, began plotting something darker. Far away, on the edge of Coalition space, the human warship hovered in silence. Inside its command center, Captain Elias watched the Coalition's response on a hidden feed. He smirked. "They're scared," he said to his crew. A young officer frowned. "Do you think they'll attack us, sir?" Elias's smile faded. They might, but it doesn't matter. We didn't build this ship for them. Then who did we build it for? Elias's gaze turned to the distant stars, where an ancient forgotten threat lurked. For what's coming, he said quietly. Back in the Coalition chamber, a shadowy figure slipped into a side room, activating a private communication line. The humans must be stopped, they whispered. Prepare the fleet. We strike first. And so, the seeds of betrayal were sown, even as the galaxy's true enemy stirred in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Envoy's mission. Kale stood aboard the Coalition envoy ship, her heart pounding as they approached the massive human warship. The vessel loomed in the darkness like a sleeping beast, its smooth black hull absorbing the faint starlight. No windows, no external markings, just an overwhelming presence of silent power. It was both awe-inspiring and deeply unnerving. Ambassador Kale, the pilot said nervously, we've received docking clearance. Their automated systems are guiding us in. Kale nodded, masking her unease. Understood. Keep communications open at all times. As the small envoy ship docked, Kale and her team stepped into the human warship's airlock. The doors hissed open, revealing a stark metallic corridor. Human soldiers stood waiting, their expressions unreadable behind mirrored visors. Their weapons, compact yet intimidating, were held at ease. Their body language spoke of readiness. A man stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp blue eyes that seemed to pierce through Cal's thoughts. He wasn't wearing armor, just a simple black uniform with a single silver insignia. Ambassador Kale, he said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable authority. Welcome aboard the Invictus. I'm Captain Elias. Kale extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Elias hesitated for a fraction of a second before shaking it. His grip was firm, deliberate. Thank you for allowing us aboard, Captain, Kale said. The Galactic Coalition values this opportunity to open a dialogue. Elias smirked faintly. Dialogue. That's one word for it. Follow me. As Elias led them through the warship, Kale couldn't help but marvel at its design. The corridors were spotless, the technology sleek and efficient. Everything seemed purposeful, as if built for a singular goal. Her team exchanged uneasy glances. The air was heavy, not from tension but from something else, an almost imperceptible hum that seemed to come from the ship itself, as if it were alive. Impressive, Kale remarked, trying to break the silence. This ship is unlike anything we've seen in the Coalition. Elias glanced at her. It's not meant to impress. Then what is it meant for? Elias didn't answer. Instead, he stopped in front of a large door. With a wave of his hand, it slid open, revealing the ship's command center. Cal's breath caught. The room was massive, filled with glowing displays and holographic maps of the galaxy. At its center was a single towering console, manned by officers who worked with precise efficiency. Captain on deck, an officer called, and the room fell silent. At ease, Elias said. He turned to Kale. This is where we manage the ship. Everything you see here is designed for one purpose. Survival. Survival? Kale asked. Survival against what? Elias met her gaze, his expression dark. That depends on your coalition. Kale stiffened. The coalition has no interest in conflict with humanity. Elias raised an eyebrow. Does it? Your fleet movements suggest otherwise. We've intercepted encrypted signals from several of your outposts. They're preparing for something. Cal's heart sank. She had heard whispers of paranoia among the coalition's leadership, but she hadn't realized it had escalated to this. Captain, I assure you. Elias held up a hand. I'm not here for assurances. Let me make one thing clear. We didn't build the Invictus to dominate or threaten. We built it because we had to. Kale frowned. Had to. What do you mean? Elias stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think humanity's greatest enemy is you. It's not. There's something out there, Ambassador, something ancient, something powerful. And when it comes, your coalition will be the first to fall." Before Cal could respond, a loud alarm blared through the command center. The officers sprang into action, their movements quick and coordinated. "What's happening?" Cal asked. Elias turned to his crew. "Report. Unidentified ship on approach," an officer said. "It's broadcasting a coalition signature, but the energy readings don't match." Elias's jaw tightened. "Bring it up on the main display." The holographic map shifted, showing a sleek coalition vessel. At first glance, it looked like a standard diplomatic ship, but its weapons systems were active, and its engines burned hotter than normal. Cal's eyes widened. "That's not one of ours. At least, it shouldn't be." Elias nodded grimly. "Looks like someone in your coalition decided to take matters into their own hands." "Wait," Cal said, stepping forward. "You think they're here to attack?" Elias didn't answer. Instead, he turned to his crew. "Activate countermeasures. Lock weapons on that ship. If it makes one wrong move, we take it out." Cal grabbed his arm. "Wait. There could be innocent people aboard." Elias looked at her, his expression cold. "On this ship, Ambassador, we don't take chances." As the tension in the room mounted, the coalition vessel drew closer. Cal could feel the weight of every decision hanging in the air. "Stand down," she pleaded. "Let me try to contact them." Elias hesitated, then gave a sharp nod. "You've got one chance." Cal activated the communication console, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "This is Ambassador Cal of the Galactic Coalition. Identify yourselves immediately." For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice crackled through the speakers. "Ambassador Cal, you've made a grave mistake siding with the humans. We're here to correct it." Cal's blood ran cold as the vessel powered up its weapons. Elias's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Target acquired. Fire." The Invictus unleashed a single beam of light. The coalition vessel didn't stand a chance. As the debris drifted in silence, Elias turned to Cal. "Still think we're the enemy?" Cal didn't answer. For the first time, she wondered if the coalition had already made its biggest mistake. The forgotten weapon. Cal sat in the observation chamber of the Invictus, staring out at the vast expanse of stars. The echoes of the destroyed coalition ship still haunted her. Captain Elias had been efficient, even restrained, but there was no denying the overwhelming power of the human warship. The galaxy had never faced anything like it. But what disturbed Cal most was Elias's words. "We built it because we had to." A soft chime broke her thoughts. The door slid open, and Elias entered. He carried 2 small glasses filled with a golden liquid. "Thought you could use this," he said, setting one down in front of her. Cal eyed it warily. "What is it?" "Whiskey," Elias replied. "Human tradition. Helps clear the mind." She hesitated but took a small sip. It burned her throat but left a warmth in its wake. "Thank you," she said, setting it down. "Though I doubt a drink will answer the questions I have." Elias leaned back against the wall, his expression unreadable. "You're wondering why we built the Invictus, why we pushed so far, so fast, in a galaxy that already fears us." Cal nodded. "You've said it was for survival. But survival against what?" Elias looked out the window, his eyes distant. "You ever hear of the Drexis?" Cal frowned. The name was vaguely familiar, a whispered legend told among the oldest species of the galaxy. "The Drexis are a myth. Ancient stories to scare children. They're real," Elias said flatly. "And they're coming." Cal's breath caught. "That's impossible. The Drexis were said to have vanished millions of years ago, if they ever existed at all." Elias turned back to her, his voice low but firm. "We found the evidence a decade ago, deep in the outer rim, on a derelict station. Logs, schematics, and remnants. The kind of tech that makes you question everything you know about the universe." Cal leaned forward, her curiosity overriding her fear. Remnants? Of what? Elias hesitated. Of life. Or what used to be life. The Drexes don't conquer, they consume. Entire planets stripped bare, civilizations reduced to genetic material. The few survivors we found, if you can call them that, they were barely recognizable, twisted into something else. Kale shuddered. Why didn't you tell the Coalition? We could have prepared together. Elias laughed bitterly. You think the Coalition would have believed us? Even now, when the evidence is clear, they'd rather point their weapons at us than at what's out there. Kale wanted to argue, but she couldn't. The Coalition's paranoia was as much a part of its nature as its politics. Elias tapped a console on the wall, and the observation chamber transformed. The windows darkened, and a holographic projection filled the room. It was an archive of the derelict station Elias had mentioned. Kel's stomach churned as she saw the recordings. Images of twisted biological experiments, machines fused with organic material, and massive, skeletal remains of creatures that defied understanding. We took what we could from the station, Elias said. The Invictus was designed based on their technology, not to match them, but to survive them. Kale turned to him, horrified. You're saying this ship is built using Drex's tech? Adapted from it, Elias corrected. We didn't have a choice. Our fleets wouldn't stand a chance otherwise. Her mind raced. The Coalition had always prided itself on unity, on cooperation between species. But humanity had taken a different path, one born of isolation and relentless ingenuity. And now it seemed they were the only ones truly prepared for what lay ahead. The hologram shifted, showing a map of the galaxy. Elias pointed to a cluster of systems on the outer rim. This is where we first encountered them. For now, they've stayed on the edge, testing, probing. But it's only a matter of time before they move in force. Kale studied the map. The Drex's systems were dangerously close to Coalition space. If they attacked, the Coalition would be the first to fall. What do you expect us to do? She asked. Elias's gaze hardened. That depends on your leaders. You can either work with us, or you can keep trying to undermine us. But if the Drexes come, you'll need more than politics to survive. Before Kale could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. Captain, we've detected movement in Drex's space, a voice reported. Elias's expression darkened. How much movement? Enough to suggest a fleet, the voice replied. Kale's heart sank. She had come aboard the Invictus to address a threat from humanity, only to discover a far greater danger looming over them all. Elias turned to her. Looks like we're out of time, Ambassador. Kale stared at the map, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The Coalition was unprepared, fractured by fear and mistrust. Humanity, for all its faults, might be the galaxy's only hope. Captain, she said, her voice steady, if we're going to survive this, we'll need more than one warship. Elias smiled faintly. Good thing we built a fleet. The hologram shifted again, revealing dozens of warships identical to the Invictus. Kale gasped. You've been hiding an entire armada. Elias nodded. Like I said, Ambassador, we built it because we had to. Outside, the stars seemed to dim as the shadow of the approaching Drexes loomed closer. Galactic betrayal. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Coalition buzzed with whispers as the Council reconvened. Representatives from countless species debated fiercely, their voices overlapping in a chaotic hum. The recent revelations of humanity's hidden fleet had sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Supreme Chancellor Thrazak raised his claws, silencing the chamber. The reports are confirmed. Humanity has amassed a fleet of warships, each as powerful as the Invictus. This is not an act of defense. It is a declaration of supremacy. Ambassador Vril, always the loudest voice of fear, leaned forward. We cannot allow humanity to wield such power unchecked. Their so-called warnings about the Drexes are nothing but an excuse to dominate the galaxy. Ambassador Kale, seated at the far end of the chamber, clenched her fists. She had returned from the Invictus with urgent pleas for unity, but her words had fallen on deaf ears. "You're wrong," Kale interjected, her voice cutting through the noise. "Humanity didn't build their fleet to dominate. They built it to survive. The Drexis are real, and if we don't act together, none of us will survive their arrival." Vril scoffed. "And how do we know the Drexis aren't another human fabrication? A ploy to make us kneel?" Kale stood, her anger barely contained. "You think humanity wants to rule over the ashes of a galaxy consumed by the Drexis? I've seen the evidence. I've seen what's coming. If we don't trust them, we'll face extinction." Thrazak's eyes narrowed. "Trust is not given lightly, Ambassador Kale. Humanity's actions speak louder than your words. They've hidden their fleet, lied to us, and now demand our submission under the guise of protection." Kale shook her head. "They don't want submission, they want cooperation. There's a difference." But her words were lost in the rising tide of fear and suspicion. In the shadows of the chamber, whispers of a darker plan began to spread. A secret cabal of coalition leaders had already made their decision. Humanity's power was too great, their fleet too dangerous. They would strike first, eliminating the threat before it could grow any larger. Meanwhile, aboard the Invictus, Captain Elias reviewed the latest intel with his officers. Reports indicated increased coalition fleet activity near human borders. Patrol routes were shifting, and communication intercepts hinted at something big. "They're planning something," Elias said, his voice steady but grim. Lieutenant Harper, his second-in-command, frowned. "A preemptive strike." Elias nodded. "Most likely. They don't trust us, and frankly, I can't blame them. But if they attack us now, they'll be wasting resources we can't afford to lose when the Drexis arrive." Harper hesitated. "Should we contact Earth? Request reinforcements?" Elias shook his head. "No. We need to handle this without escalating the situation. The last thing we want is a full-scale war with the Coalition." As they spoke, a proximity alert blared through the command center. "Captain," an officer called out, "multiple Coalition vessels approaching. They're broadcasting diplomatic clearance, but their formations suggest a tactical approach." Elias's jaw tightened. "Bring them in, but keep shields up. I want weapons on standby." On the Coalition flagship, Commander Vrix stood on the bridge, her insectoid wings twitching with tension. She had been tasked with leading the diplomatic mission to humanity, but the ship's concealed weapon systems told a different story. "Our orders are clear," Vrix said to her crew. "If humanity refuses to disarm, we engage. Their fleet must be neutralized before the Drexis, or anyone else, can exploit it." As they entered the range of the Invictus, Vrix activated the communication channel. Elias's image appeared on the screen, his expression calm but cold. "Commander Vrix," Elias said, "you've come quite far for a diplomatic visit." Vrix forced a smile. "Captain Elias, the Coalition has decided that transparency is needed. We request a formal inspection of your fleet." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Inspection? Sounds more like a search party." "Call it what you will," Vrix replied. "If humanity has nothing to hide, there should be no issue." Elias leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. "Humanity doesn't answer to the Coalition. You don't trust us, and that's your problem. But I'll warn you now, any aggressive moves will be met with overwhelming force." Vrix's smile faltered. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact," Elias replied. Before Vrix could respond, alarms blared on both ships. Sensors picked up massive energy signatures approaching from the outer rim. Kale, still in the Coalition chamber, received the news moments later. Her communicator buzzed with an urgent message from the Invictus. "Ambassador," Elias's voice came through, strained but steady. "We've got incoming. Drexis vessels, dozens of them. They've breached the outer defenses." Kale's heart raced. "What about the Coalition fleet near you?" "They're hesitating," Elias said. probably deciding whether to fight us or the Drexus. If they don't make the right call soon, we're all dead. Kale turned to the council. The Drexus are here. Humanity was right all along. If we don't work together, we'll lose everything. But Vril and Thrazak remained unmoved. This is exactly what the humans wanted, Vril said. To use fear to manipulate us into submission. Kale slammed her fists on the table. Enough. Look beyond your paranoia. The Drexus won't stop with humanity or the Coalition. They'll consume us all. In that moment, a Coalition officer burst into the chamber, his face pale. Supreme Chancellor, reports confirm Drexus forces attacking outer colonies. Casualties are catastrophic. The room fell silent. Kale seized the moment. This is what humanity prepared for. If we keep fighting each other, we're handing the Drexus our extinction on a silver platter. Thrazak hesitated, his claws twitching. And what if humanity turns on us after the Drexus are defeated? Kale met his gaze, her voice unwavering. Then we'll deal with that later. Right now, survival is the only thing that matters. As the Drexus fleet closed in, the Invictus powered up its weapons. Captain Elias stood on the bridge, staring at the approaching threat. Send a message to the Coalition fleet, Elias ordered. Tell them this. You can either stand with us, or be the first to fall. Outside, the void erupted with the light of battle as humanity's warship faced its greatest challenge yet. A galaxy in flames. The galaxy had never seen a battle like this. The Drexus fleet, a terrifying mass of organic and metallic monstrosities, emerged from the void with surgical precision. Their ships were grotesque, pulsing with sickly green energy, like living creatures bred for war. Behind them, a black haze followed, what humanity called the harvest cloud, a living weapon that consumed everything in its path. Aboard the Invictus, Captain Elias stood at the command console, his face illuminated by the glow of the battle maps. The Coalition fleet had finally joined the fray, their formations aligning with humanity's forces. But distrust lingered in every maneuver. Status report, Elias barked. Drexus fleet count, 87 confirmed ships, Lieutenant Harper replied. Harvest cloud moving at 0.3 light speed. Coalition forces engaging at long range. Elias's eyes narrowed. And the Coalition? Harper hesitated. They're holding back. Minimal aggression. They're treating us as much of a threat as the Drexus. Elias clenched his fists. Fools, they're wasting precious firepower. Send a broadcast to their command ships. They either fight or they're on their own. In the Coalition flagship, Commander Vrix watched the battle unfold with growing dread. Drexus ships sliced through their defenses with terrifying ease, swarming like predators drawn to blood. Their weapons seemed alive, latching onto Coalition ships and tearing them apart from within. A message appeared on her console. It was from Elias. This isn't the time for hesitation. If you hold back, we all die. Vrix sneered, her pride warring with common sense. The Coalition had always prided itself on unity, on diplomacy, but this enemy didn't negotiate. She glanced at the casualty reports piling up on her display. Hundreds of Coalition ships had already been lost. She gritted her teeth. All ships, focus fire on Drexus vessels. Divert auxiliary power to shields. No more holding back. Her officers hesitated, but the command was clear. The Coalition finally began to fight as one. Kale, aboard the Invictus as a diplomatic observer, stood frozen in the command center. The scale of destruction was beyond anything she had imagined. Coalition ships exploded like fragile toys under the relentless Drexus assault. Even humanity's formidable fleet was struggling to hold the line. "What are those things?" she whispered, staring at a Drexus ship tearing through a Coalition cruiser. Elias, standing beside her, didn't take his eyes off the battle map. "We call them harvesters. They're not just ships. They're living weapons. They absorb everything they destroy, growing stronger with each kill." Cal's voice trembled. "How do we stop them?" Elias glanced at her, his expression grim. "We don't stop them. We outlast them. And pray it's enough." The battle raged on. The Invictus unleashed devastating salvos of energy, its experimental weapons punching through Drex's ships with precision. Every hit sent shockwaves rippling through the battlefield, but the Drexes adapted quickly, their ships evolving to counter human tactics. "Captain," Harper called out, her voice tense, "the harvest cloud is accelerating. If it reaches the fleet, we're done." Elias stared at the display. The cloud wasn't just a weapon. It was a force of nature, consuming matter, energy, even light itself. It advanced like a tidal wave, unstoppable and inevitable. "Prepare the auxiliary fleet," Elias ordered. "We'll lure the cloud away from the main battle." Cale turned to him, horrified. "You're sending ships into that thing. That's suicide." Elias's jaw tightened. "It's the only way to buy us time. We can't win this if the harvest cloud reaches our lines." In a daring maneuver, a group of human warships broke away from the main fleet, drawing the harvest cloud's attention. Their engines flared as they raced toward the outer rim, firing bursts of energy to keep the cloud focused on them. Cale watched in silent horror as the cloud engulfed the fleeing ships one by one. Each loss felt like a blow to her chest. "Do they know they won't make it?" she asked quietly. "They know," Elias said, his voice heavy. "Every one of them volunteered." Cale stared at him, a newfound respect mingling with her fear. Humanity's willingness to sacrifice, to endure unimaginable losses for the sake of survival, was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The diversion worked. The harvest cloud slowed, but the Drex's fleet pressed harder, sensing weakness in the coalition lines. One by one, coalition ships began to break formation, retreating under the relentless assault. Elias slammed his fist on the console. "Damn it, they're falling apart." Cale stepped forward. "Let me speak to them." Elias hesitated, then nodded. "You've got one chance, Ambassador." Cale activated the comms channel, her voice echoing across the coalition fleet. "This is Ambassador Cale. I know you're scared. I know you think running will save you. But the Drexes don't stop. They don't spare the weak. If we don't stand together now, we lose everything. Our worlds, our families, our very existence. Humanity is fighting because they understand this. It's time we do too. Fight, not for the coalition, but for survival." Her words sparked a ripple of hope, a surge of defiance. Slowly, the coalition ships began to regroup, their weapons lighting up the darkness once more. Elias turned to Cale, a rare smile on his face. "Not bad, Ambassador." Before Cale could respond, an officer shouted, "Captain, we've detected a new energy signature. It's massive." The map updated, revealing a colossal Drexus mothership emerging from the void. Its size dwarfed even the Invictus. Elias's smile vanished. "All ships, focus fire on that thing. It goes down, or we all do." Cale stared at the monstrous ship, her heart pounding. The battle was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The galaxy burned as the forces of life fought against the endless hunger of the Drexus. Victory was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the galaxy would never be the same again. The final betrayal. The battle was chaos. The Drexus mothership dominated the field, its organic hull shimmering with unnatural energy. Smaller Drexus ships swarmed like insects, overwhelming coalition and human warships alike. The Invictus led the charge, its experimental weapons carving paths through the enemy. But even its power was stretched thin. Captain Elias gripped the console tightly, his calm demeanor showing cracks. "We're barely holding the line. How long until the reinforcements arrive?" Lieutenant Harper didn't look up from her display. 40 minutes, sir. But at this rate." Elias didn't let her finish. He knew what she was going to say. They wouldn't last that long. Meanwhile, aboard the coalition flagship, Commander Vrix's claws tapped nervously against her command chair. Her fleet was struggling, and the Drexus mothership was unstoppable. Even with humanity's superior firepower, the combined fleets were barely making a dent. She turned to her second-in-command. "Do we have the targeting solution?" The officer hesitated. "Yes, Commander. But if we fire on the Invictus, the line will collapse." Vrix's mandibles clicked in frustration. "The humans have made us dependent on them. If we don't act now, they'll use this victory to seize control of the galaxy. The Coalition cannot survive under humanity's shadow." "Commander, if the Drexus win, there won't be a Coalition left," the officer argued. Vrix's eyes narrowed. "Fire the weapon." "That's an order." The flagship's hidden weapon system activated, silently targeting the Invictus. On the Invictus, Kale watched the battle unfold in growing despair. The Drexus mothership seemed invincible, absorbing every attack and retaliating with devastating force. Even humanity's experimental weapons barely left a mark. She turned to Elias. "There has to be something we're missing. Some weakness." Elias's gaze was fixed on the battle map. "If there is, we haven't found it yet." Before Cal could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. "Captain," Harper shouted, "we've detected an energy spike from the Coalition flagship. They're targeting us." Elias's eyes widened. "What?" A moment later, a beam of searing energy shot through space, slamming into the Invictus. The ship shuddered violently as sparks flew from consoles and systems overloaded. Kale was thrown to the floor, gripping the edge of a console to steady herself. "What's happening? Why are they firing on us?" Elias's voice was ice cold. "Because they think we're the real threat." On the Coalition flagship, Vrix watched as the Invictus faltered, its shields flickering under the surprise attack. "Direct hit," her officer reported. "Good," Vrix said. "Send a transmission to all ships. Tell them humanity's fleet is compromised and must be neutralized." The officer hesitated. "Commander, with respect, this will doom us all. Without the Invictus, the Drexus will overwhelm us." Vrix's claws flexed in frustration. "That's enough, Lieutenant. The Coalition must endure, even if it means sacrificing humanity." Back aboard the Invictus, Elias struggled to stabilize his ship. "Damage report," he barked. "Shields at 30%, Harper replied. "Hull breaches on decks 7 and 9. Coalition forces are shifting focus to us." Elias slammed his fist on the console. "Idiots! They're handing the Drexus the galaxy on a silver platter." Kale scrambled to her feet, her voice shaking. "You have to talk to them. Make them see reason." "They're past reason," Elias growled. "But I'm not letting this ship go down without a fight." He turned to his crew. "All weapons on the Drexus mothership. We take it out or die trying." As the Invictus unleashed its full arsenal, the Drexus mothership reacted. Its organic surface writhed and shimmered, absorbing the energy and retaliating with a massive blast of green energy. The Invictus took the hit head-on, its shields barely holding. The Coalition fleet hesitated, unsure whether to continue their betrayal or focus on the real enemy. Kale grabbed Elias's arm. "If you don't stop the Coalition, this fight is over. Let me talk to them." Elias hesitated, then nodded. "You've got 30 seconds. Make it count." Kale activated the communication channel, broadcasting to all Coalition ships. Her voice was raw with urgency. "This is Ambassador Kale. Stop your attack on the Invictus. You're dooming us all. The Drexus are the enemy, not humanity. If you let them win, there will be no Coalition left, no galaxy left. Humanity is the only reason we've lasted this long. Trust them. Trust me." On the Coalition flagship, Vrix sneered at the message. "Cut her transmission." Before her officer could comply, the Drexus mothership unleashed another devastating wave, obliterating 3 Coalition ships in an instant. "Commander," the officer said, panic in his voice, "we're losing too many ships. If we don't regroup with humanity, we won't survive." Vrix's claws trembled. She knew he was right, but admitting it meant surrendering to her fears about humanity's dominance. Another blast rocked the flagship, and Vrix made her decision. "All ships, focus fire on the Drexus mothership," she ordered reluctantly. Elias smirked as he saw the coalition fleet shift their focus. About time they came to their senses. Kale let out a shaky breath. They listened. Elias glanced at her. "For now. But this isn't over." The Invictus powered up its final weapon, a massive cannon powered by the energy of a collapsing star. "Target the Drexus mothership," Elias commanded. "Let's end this." The weapon fired, a brilliant beam of light cutting through the void. It struck the Drexus mothership dead center, piercing its organic hull and causing it to writhe violently. The Drexus fleet faltered, their hive-like coordination breaking apart. For the first time, victory seemed possible. But as the mothership crumbled, Elias's face darkened. "This isn't their full force," he muttered. "They're testing us. The real fight hasn't even begun." Kale stared at him, her heart sinking. Then what was this? Elias turned to her, his expression grim. This was just the beginning. Humanity's stand. The battlefield was eerily quiet. The shattered remains of the Drexus mothership floated in the void, its once terrifying form reduced to a smoldering husk. Coalition and human ships drifted cautiously, their weapons still hot from the furious battle. The silence was fragile, as though the galaxy itself held its breath. On the bridge of the Invictus, Captain Elias surveyed the destruction. His face was drawn, his usual confidence tempered by exhaustion and the weight of what lay ahead. "Status?" he asked, his voice calm but strained. Lieutenant Harper glanced at her console. "Drexus forces in retreat. Remaining coalition vessels regrouping. Damage to our fleet is extensive." Elias nodded. "And the mothership?" "Destroyed," Harper confirmed. But what?" Elias pressed, already dreading the answer. Harper hesitated, then brought up a display. "We've detected faint energy signatures near the wreckage. It's similar to the harvest clouds readings. I think they seeded the battlefield." Elias's jaw tightened. "They're leaving a trap." On the coalition flagship, Commander Vrix listened to the reports with mounting dread. The Drexus mothership had been their greatest threat, or so she had believed. Now, as whispers of lingering Drexus energy spread through the fleet, her confidence wavered. Ambassador Kale's voice crackled through the comms. "Commander Vrix, this isn't over. The Drexus don't retreat without purpose. They've left something behind." Vrix scowled. More human paranoia. Kale's tone sharpened. "Look around you. Do you really think this was their full force? The Drexus are probing us, testing our limits. If we don't prepare now, the next attack will be the last." Vrix hesitated, her pride clashing with the grim reality unfolding before her. She glanced at her officer, who silently nodded in agreement. "Fine," Vrix said reluctantly. "What do you suggest?" Elias addressed both fleets through an open broadcast, his voice steady and commanding. "The Drexus have retreated, but they've left a parting gift. Residual energy signatures suggest they've seeded the area with dormant bioweapons. These things are designed to activate once we lower our guard. If we don't act now, they'll spread to our systems, infecting everything in their path." A coalition envoy interrupted. "And how do you propose we handle this, Captain Elias? Your fleet is damaged, and ours is barely holding together." Elias's lips thinned. "We'll use the Invictus's Nova array." The coalition representatives fell silent. Even Kale looked shocked. "The Nova array?" Kale asked. "That's destructive," Elias finished. "I know. It's the only way to neutralize the bioweapons before they activate. But the blast radius will cover the entire battlefield. If your ships stay here, they won't survive." Vrix's mandibles clicked nervously. "You're asking us to retreat and trust you with this. How do we know this isn't a ploy to wipe out what remains of the coalition fleet?" Elias's eyes narrowed. Because if I wanted to destroy you, I wouldn't need an excuse. The Invictus has the firepower to take on your entire fleet and win. But right now, we're fighting for survival, not against each other, but against an enemy that won't stop until we're all gone. Kale stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Commander Vrix, I've been aboard this ship. I've seen humanity's resolve. They don't want dominance. They want a future. Trust them, or this could be the end of all of us. Reluctantly, the Coalition fleet began to retreat, their damaged ships limping away from the battlefield. The Invictus remained behind, its battered hull a stark reminder of the cost of the battle. Elias turned to his crew. Prepare the Nova array. Full charge. Harper hesitated. Captain, activating the array will drain the ship's power. We'll be defenseless for hours. I know, Elias said quietly. But if we don't do this, the Drexis win without firing another shot. Kale watched as the crew moved with quiet efficiency. The tension in the air was palpable, but there was no fear, only resolve. You're risking everything, she said softly. Elias nodded. That's what survival demands. The Nova array activated, its core glowing with blinding intensity. A deep hum filled the ship as energy built to critical levels. Outside, the residual Drexis energy began to stir, reacting to the imminent threat. Array at full charge, Harper reported. Elias gave the command. Fire. A brilliant wave of energy erupted from the Invictus, expanding outward in a perfect sphere. It consumed the battlefield, incinerating the Drexis bioweapons in an instant. The light was so bright it could be seen from nearby star systems, a silent declaration of humanity's defiance. When the light faded, the Invictus floated in silence, its systems drained and its power flickering. Hours later, the Coalition fleet returned to the scene, finding the Invictus battered but intact. Commander Vrix hailed the ship, her tone begrudgingly respectful. Captain Elias, it seems you've saved us. For now. Elias's face appeared on the screen, weary but resolute. This isn't over, Commander. The Drexis will be back, and next time, they won't hold back. If we want to survive, we need to work together. Vrix nodded slowly. Perhaps you're right, but know this, Captain. The Coalition will never bow to humanity. We don't need you to bow, Elias replied. We just need you to fight. As the fleets began to regroup, Kale stood beside Elias on the bridge, gazing out at the stars. They'll come around, she said. They have to. Elias nodded. They'll have to decide what matters more, their pride or their survival. But when the Drexis come back, humanity will be ready. And we'll make sure the galaxy is too. Kale watched him, a glimmer of hope in her chest. For the first time, she believed that, together, they might have a chance. Far beyond the edges of the galaxy, in the black void where no light reached, the Drexis stirred. Their hive minds seethed with anticipation, their defeat only fueling their hunger. The war wasn't over. It was only beginning.